What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. Today, we are going to be breaking down the upcoming Bassmaster Open on Lake Eufaula in Alabama. I pulled a bunch of data from the Deep Dive app from specific tournaments on Lake Eufaula in the pre-spawn. We're going to break down the top patterns, the top sections of the lake, baits, things like that, so that we can get a really good idea of what the pros and all the open anglers are going to be facing this upcoming weekend during the Bassmaster Open. I'm also going to be breaking down the lake with a new feature in the Deep Dive app, which is a new water clarity feature, which can be super cool. And I'm also going to do a recap of some of the recent Bassmaster Elite Series events as well near the end of the stream. So we're going to be kind of tournament heavy in this video, but I'm going to hopefully keep it as instructional as possible. And the goal of this video is to show you guys how to break down the lake in the pre-spawn using as much data, technology, information as I can to help narrow down the best ways to fish a big lake like Lake Eufaula. So really excited for this stream. It should be a really good one. Before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of the Fish the Moment podcast and the Fish the Moment live stream, which is Bridgeford Foods. Bridgeford is a longtime sponsor of the Fish the Moment live stream. They have the best beef jerky on the market. If you guys are ever going out to the lake and need a great snack to keep you full and make sure you have the energy to keep fishing for a 7 or 8 hour day, definitely pick up some Bridgeford beef jerky. You can find it at Walmart, dollar stores. I saw it at Academy Sports the other day while I was in the aisle. So it's a great snack, and it is a great company that supports bass fishing. If you guys want to support a non-endemic company, which is companies outside of the fishing industry that actually support professional anglers and YouTube creators like myself, definitely support Bridgeford beef jerky whenever you see it. Thanks to Bridgeford for supporting the Fish the Moment podcast and the Fish the Moment live stream. And thanks for everyone who has joined into the live stream here. We got Mike, Michael, Nick, Whirly Bird, Dadbod Anglers. We have Stefan, Edward, Jason, John, Gary. How's it going? Super excited. We're going to get into this, and we're just going to jump straight in because I don't really want to waste any more time. One quick thing, actually, guys, before we jump into it, so I can get a few more people jump in the stream. If you guys are watching this back on my YouTube channel afterwards and you missed the notifications, make sure you hit the bell notification on the YouTube channel page, or just like down below there's a little bell. That'll notify you of upcoming live streams. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Fish the Moment. It's just at Fish the Moment. And you can find me there. I post all of the news on when I'm going to be doing live streams, upcoming videos, all that stuff. So if you don't want to miss any content from Fish the Moment, follow me on social media or hit that bell notification and make sure you're actually subscribed, because sometimes YouTube unsubscribes people for whatever reason. So just make sure you're subscribed and you're good to go. Okay, let's roll. So let's jump into this breakdown. So here is Lake Eufaula. This is Lake Eufaula in Alabama, not Oklahoma, not to be confused. They're fishing Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma also for the Open, so we'll break down that tournament as well. And I might actually do a pre-fish or a pre-tournament video on the lake from Lake Eufaula because it's close to my house. But anyways, basically, Lake Eufaula in Alabama is a big reservoir. It is mainly a stained water reservoir, lowland reservoir. You're not going to be dealing with a ton of clear water situations. You're not having guys fish 40, 50, 60 feet deep, though that doesn't mean guys are not going to be fishing offshore. There is some clear water down the lower end and some clear creeks up and down this lake, as we'll see in the Deep Dive app here in a minute. But before I start breaking down this lake with all of the mapping and all that stuff, I went and actually pulled some data for you guys, which I'm pretty excited to share from the Deep Dive app. This is data that I have access to because I helped pull all this data, but you're getting a sneak peek into this. You can't really find this anywhere. This is like not in the app. You can't pull it to this level of detail yet, but we're working on getting ways to cut the data like this in the future. So basically, let me just pull up some of these graphs here for you guys and show you what's going on. This is tournament data from 258 tournament patterns that we've collected on Lake Eufaula, specifically on Lake Eufaula in the pre-spawn. This is from major professional fishing tournaments, and these are the top patterns from guys who finished high in these tournaments. So basically, this data has a lot of variety to it in terms of the different years that the guys fished Lake Eufaula in the spring from different events, and also different conditions. So we should get a pretty good sample size in terms of determining what's going on the lake here. David Fields with the $9.99 super chat. Keep up the great content. Appreciate it, David. Appreciate the super chat. So on the overall level, the high level, and I know these graphs are not great, guys. I put this together like right before the stream. At my former corporate self, who used to work for Walmart marketing, would not approve of these slides, but they get the job done. I kind of just did it quick and dirty for you guys, so apologize if the slides aren't super super clean. But anyways, basically, if we look here, you can see in the pre-spawn on Lake Eufaula in Alabama, offshore dominates. 73% of top tournament finishes come offshore. 27% of top tournament finishes come shallow. If you distribute that across the lake in terms of section of lake, I'm actually going to move this on the slide here because you guys can't really see it because of my face. There we go. It's not as symmetrical, but it works better. For section of lake, you can see that overall you have a pretty even split between the mid-lake and the lower end of the lake. It's actually 51-49% split between mid-lake and lower end. And within that, you can see in the mid-lake section of the lake, 62% of the top finishes in the mid-section of the lake come from the first half of the creek, 21% from the back half of the creek, and 17% from the main lake. On the lower end, it's actually a 50-50 split. You would think that this is not very much sample size because it's weird to get a 50-50 split, but that's actually 72 patterns in each of these. So 72 main lake patterns, 72 first half of creek patterns. So there's enough sample to actually make it statistically significant. If you guys aren't data guys, don't worry. I'm going to get through this part and we'll get to stuff that's not data, but I think this is interesting. I love this stuff. So anyways, even split main lake first half of the creek on the lower end. And I'm going to show you guys how I use this data to actually determine what the patterns should be or what I would do. I'm going to kind of predict what the pros are going to do, and I'm also going to predict what I would do from the tournament, so we'll do both. In terms of water clarity, basically stained water dominates. You don't want to be in the dirty water, and there's really not much clear water on Lake Eufaula, as you'll see from the deep dive app here in a minute when I pull up the water clarity map. But basically, stained water is going to be where these guys are fishing. Stained water to me is like 2 to 3 foot of water visibility. That's clear enough that you can still fish offshore. It'll put the bass in less than 20 foot of water usually though, so like maybe 25 feet maximum. So based on this data, I would say that if I was going to be fishing this tournament, my best chance of doing well would be to fish offshore in the first half of the creeks or maybe out towards the main lake, but probably first half of the creeks is where I want to spend the majority of my time. Fishing offshore in stained water. Don't want to be in dirty water, and if you can find clear water, that's probably even better, but if anything, find that stained water, get in the first half of the creeks, fishing offshore, and you're good to go. So that's what the data is telling us so far. Next up, we have a distribution of the structure, the key structures. And again, my face is in the way, so I'm going to shrink this chart a little bit so you guys can see this. There we go. Didn't plan for my face to be there. Anyways, so if we, Sharon says, I teach math, give me the numbers. That's what we got. We got the numbers for you guys. So if you guys are looking at this data from structure, you can see that overall offshore flats are going to dominate, which makes a lot of sense. We're fishing a lowland reservoir. There's a lot of offshore flats, and flats are very common pre-spawn areas because usually they're just outside of the spawning pockets, the spawning coves. So offshore flats are going to be the predominant piece of structure that these guys are probably going to find the fish around. Another good option are rounded points, which are basically the points right out in front of the spawning pockets. Actual spawning pockets, secondary points, which would be points back in the creeks, ditches, shallow flats, like maybe in the backs of bays or backs of pockets, and then we have a distribution kind of on the tail end there of just some random stuff. But overall, offshore flats, rounded points, some offshore areas are very common in the pre-spawn. Nothing crazy there, but just kind of interesting to see how dominant the offshore flats are. For cover, again, need to resize this chart. The predominant piece of cover that dominates on Lake Eufaula is brush piles. If you guys have ever heard of a tournament on Lake Eufaula in Alabama, brush piles are the deal. There's thousands of them, tens of thousands of brush piles in Lake Eufaula, making it a little bit of a landmine in terms of like trying to find a productive brush pile, because I would expect that maybe only 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20 is actually productive in holding bass. So it's a lot of brush piles to have to sift through to find productive ones. And it's very well documented and known that that's the way that guys catch fish on Lake Eufaula. So I would expect that there's going to be a significant number of anglers that are fishing brush piles or looking for brush piles. After that, you have the bank grass, you have some shallow docks, shell beds, which is kind of a sneaky little deal that I know Jacob Wheeler did really well on when he won one of the Major League Fishing tournaments over there. Shell beds is a sneaky offshore deal we'll talk about. Also, this bait fish. Targeting bass suspended around bait fish could be a little bit of a player as well. I'm going to get into some of these more sneaky types of cover because really you're probably going to be dealing with the same types of structures around the lake, the flats and the points. But from a cover perspective, if you can get away from the brush piles and find another productive piece of cover, like a shell bed, road beds, bait fish, that are holding fish offshore, you're going to have less pressure from other anglers and probably have a better chance of doing well in this tournament. Finally, you have the baits. So from a baits perspective, you have deep diving crankbaits, a great pre-spawn bait when bass are getting around brush piles, offshore areas just in general. You also have deep diving jerk baits, so suspending jerk baits, the water's a little bit clearer. Bladed jigs up in the shallow grass, spinner baits, both shallow and offshore in the brush piles, and then you have just swim baits, football jigs, all kinds of stuff. They're just your traditional offshore baits. So we have a wide range of baits that play, but overall, deep diving crankbaits, deep diving jerk baits, spinner baits around the brush piles, that's usually what gets it done on Lake Eufaula. Fish offshore flats with brush piles, with a deep diving crankbait or deep diving jerk bait. That's your highest probability of how the tournament's probably going to get won. And the challenge with that is that the locals have a big advantage in these Bassmaster Opens. If guys want to just jackpot a Bassmaster Open and they know a ton of brush piles, or if there's someone who went out and pre-practiced for 2-3 weeks before the off limits and just went and graphed a pile of brush piles, they're going to have a big advantage over the other anglers. The more brush piles you have, the better. So there's a couple of ideas here and from this data that we kind of got. So now that we have those insights, let's jump over to the mapping and start trying to see how we would break this down on a map. And this is what I would do if I was actually fishing, this tournament or any tournament. I would be trying to use the data the best I could. Maybe not everyone has the deep dive data, but I would try to use this data the best I could, and I'd be trying to determine where on the lake I should be fishing. Now, if we pull up Google Earth here, and I'm actually going to pull up the Deep Dive app as well, my first objective is to figure out the section of lake that I should be fishing. The section of lake is basically where on the lake I need to be targeting to find the most productive water. So on Lake Eufaula, there's going to be a premium, honestly, on finding the clear water. It's been pretty muddy from what I've seen on the Deep Dive app and the water clarity maps we've been generating for Lake Eufaula. So finding that clear water is going to be imperative, and also figuring out where you can find the offshore flats, where you can find good structure and cover to actually hold these fish. So let me pull this over, and I'm going to get this pulled up so you guys can see it. Display capture. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to get this all organized for you. There we go. Okay. So you got the Deep Dive app pulled up here. So we actually just put in something new, guys, that is, this is just on my side. It's not actually in the app right now, but we're going to be putting it out here in a bit. It's going to come out here in the next couple weeks. Basically, it's a feature where you can go into lakes like Lake Eufaula, where we have these water clarity maps. And also, we're going to be rolling out more water clarity maps for the Deep Dive app if you guys want them for your lake. We have like 15 or 20 we've added even this week that we're going to roll out. We haven't launched them to the app live, but we're just testing them, making sure everything looks good. So more water clarity maps coming, and we're just adding more and more every week. So basically the new tool that we put in that's, again, just on my side, this is not available in the app yet, but we're rolling it out. You guys are seeing kind of like behind the scenes stuff with all the data and all of this. But there's a tool where basically you can have a slider, and let me move this up here so you can kind of see a little bit more what I'm talking about. There you go. So there's a slider here, and you can actually slide right to left and see the water clarity across the lake. So you can see swaths of water clarity that are in a certain visibility level. So as you can see, the clearest water, if we go all the way down to clear, the clearest water is at the very bottom end of this lake. There's actually not very much clear water at all. There's no clear water. It's all stained. It's super stained up. So as you scroll down here, you can see in the bottom third of this lake, down by the dam, there's a little bit of stained water, but everything is pretty dirty overall. I would expect it to clear up over this next upcoming week, given that there's not as much rain. So this water clarity map is not going to be accurate as of the tournament day. This is as it is recently. But basically, as we keep scrolling through the clarity, you can see that once you get kind of that mix between stained and dirty, you get a few more pockets of water that show up across the map. So first up, you have this lower third of the lake. In the mouths of some of these major pockets and coves in the lower third, there's a bunch of flats out in front of this, which looks really, really interesting. You also have the first half of this creek on the lower third, the bottom third of the lake, that has a little bit of that stained / dirty water, and I expect that that's probably going to clear up to be more closer to stained by the tournament overall. But if we scroll up here, we can see on the mid part of the lake, there's also a little zone that's somewhat stained up. And if you look at the data here, you can see that there's like a couple of bridges and there's a couple of nice flat areas leading into creeks as well. So that's a pretty interesting little zone. It has some slightly stained or slightly slain / slightly dirty water. It's kind of a mix of the two. And finally, we have a couple creeks up here on the upper end of the lake that are usually shallower creeks from what I was seeing in my map study. But there's actually a couple creeks like this one that actually have pretty decent water visibility given that they're on the upper end. And there's deep water in this creek, which I'll show you on Navionics. So we're going to see there's a few creeks up on the upper end here that do have a little bit clearer water than the rest of the lake. And overall, I would say that these are going to be your key areas in this tournament just based on the water visibility and the fact that most of the water is pretty dirty. I mean, this is the general feel. Most of the lake is more dirty. The stained water is really only concentrated in a couple of creeks way up on the north end of the lake. This main creek right here, this midsection by the bridge, and then this lower end down by the dam. And I think that's going to cause a lot of boats to really group up if the water clarity doesn't clear up dramatically over the next few weeks, or the next week. But if this week, for example, there's no rain and the water clears up a lot, maybe a few new areas will play, and the Deep Dive app will be updating. So if you guys are fishing the Bassmaster Open and want to check this out, you can download the Deep Dive app. This is in the Deep Dive app right now in terms of just a general map. You don't get the way to, you can't cut it with the sliders like I do, but you can at least see the water clarity on the map. So as we see the week progress, you might see the water clear up a little bit. So that's my second data point. And one of the questions we got in here is, let's see here. Let's see. How well do you think this data will correlate with future tournaments given the introduction of live scope? So this is a really interesting question. I'll kind of get into that. And I don't know exactly with this past data how well it's going to correlate because we haven't really been tracking that as well. Obviously, past data can only give us so much information about the future because the conditions will be different and change. But hopefully this information can at least give this analysis a little bit of direction of where to go versus just shooting blind or shooting from the hip. So that's kind of the idea with the tournament data, is to give you guys a general idea of what's happening. It's not going to be perfect, but it at least gets us in the ballpark. There was one question about ads in Deep Dive from Tin Horse. We don't do ads in Deep Dive. I don't know if you're in the right app. You might be in the wrong app. We don't actually serve ads or anything in the app. So you may be actually looking at the wrong app. I don't know which app you're looking at, but we have a free version. We have a paid version. There's no ads in the Deep Dive app at all. So just putting it out there. If anyone read that comment, that is not true. We don't actually have there's no banner ads. There's no ads. We don't do ads. So anyways, don't know where that is, but that might not be that might not be a deal. And we see someone in the comments also commented on that. Anyways, so now that we've seen this, we have water clarity, we have the data from and I'm actually going to close up the phone here real quick because we don't really need that necessarily anymore because we kind of already did that analysis. Let me close up the phone. There we go. So we kind of know overall we're looking for stained water. We're looking for offshore areas around offshore flats with brush piles, maybe some shell beds and bait fish as a wild card, and we're probably going to be fishing deep diving jerkbaits, crankbaits, spinnerbaits, stuff like that. That's kind of the key on Lake Eufaula. We now know where the sections of the lake where you have that stained water, and I'm going to mark them up on the lake here with this polygon tool. So we kind of have this lower kind of zone of the lake down here. We have this middle part by the bridge that has some water, and obviously this Google Earth map is not up to date. This is an old image, so this is, when you look at this, it may look dirty, but it's not actually dirty right now. That's why you have the Deep Dive app with the water clarity feature. It actually tells you where the water clarity is clear or not. So those are the deals. Let me actually switch over to this real quick. There we go. So if we go through here and we and then do you link the app on any page? Yeah, there's a link, Frank, in the description of this live stream. If you go down this live stream, there's actually a link right down below, so you can check that out. And a couple questions on like water clarity and things like that. We can't get into specifics on the water clarity because obviously that's our own proprietary technology, but I can tell you that we have spent like 6 to 8 months perfecting this water clarity to the best of our ability, and I've been doing tests on Beaver Lake, and I go around the lake all the time checking it, and we get to a half a foot confidence, so a half a foot of water visibility on the lake in all the different zones. So if you go around and you look at the lake, you're basically at a half a foot between each of the color bands in visibility, which is awesome, and I'm checking it all the time. The main thing with the data, guys, is that it's updated on a regular basis, but it's not updated daily. It's not daily water clarity, so it's updated on a specific basis, so you might have a little bit of delay in terms of when the new image is going to pop up. Can't go into all the details on it, but basically it's updated very frequently, and it gives you a really good accurate picture of what's going on. So yeah, that's what I can say on the water clarity. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see here. So if we go now and look at, if we go to this right here with the few sections of the lake that are stained up, we can now start kind of breaking down the lake a little bit more with our contour maps and start trying to find areas that would be effective to actually fish. So if you look through here on the Google Earth map, we can go in and switch over to Navionics as well. Do that. Not many people are, apparently people are not interested in watching this because my stream view numbers are not great, but you know, we'll see what happens. Maybe people are not as happy to nerd out about all this stuff as I am, but I love doing this stuff, so let me know in the comments if you guys actually are enjoying this. Otherwise, I can just go back to doing like basic instruction stuff instead of trying to break down stuff with data, but I thought this was something fun to do. So anyways, let me switch back over to Navionics. Okay, got Navionics pulled up here. So now that we have our general zones of the lake that we feel are going to be effective, we next need to start identifying some of the key areas that the tournament data was pointing us to, which are offshore flats, rounded points, probably ditches and things, drains and stuff like that are going to be effective. Again, this lower third of the lake is going to be one of the key areas because that's one of the few areas with stained water. And if you scroll into this area, you can see that there are several miles of offshore flat. Actually, it's not just a small area. If we go through here, it's a pretty big area of water, 7 miles stretch basically of offshore flats. So that's a lot of water to potentially cover. And in this, an offshore flat, guys, is basically anywhere where the water depth is pretty much the same for a long period of time. So like, for example, you can see it goes from like 18 feet to 18 feet with some small changes in water depth over a long distance. This is literally like a quarter of a mile where it's the same exact depth. That's considered a flat. And these fish are going to be positioning pretty much all over these flats, and they're going to be setting up on key little isolated brush piles, maybe a little shell bed, any sort of cover that might be in this area. Now, this is not going to be a secret that is going to be that someone can have all to themselves. There's going to be a ton of anglers that are going to be graphing with their side imaging, with their down imaging, and finding as much structure and as much cover as they can find in this particular zone. So to separate yourself, you're going to have to either find as many brush piles as possible and hope that you're not going to be running into the same brush piles as everyone else, getting in a bad brush pile rotation, which is a whole concept of basically like, let's say that there's 30 brush piles in this area, but there's 20 boats trying to fish them. Well, maybe you keep running the 30 brush piles in this area and you get behind a boat every time. So someone's fishing it right before you get there every single time. They're catching the fish, you get there, and then they're not catching them. That's super common. So fishing brush piles can be a little bit tricky in the sense that if you get in a bad rotation or you don't have enough brush piles, you can be in trouble. And it's very hard to bank on that pattern when you're fishing a 250 boat Bassmaster Open. All the guys know what's going down. They can watch all the videos. They know what's happened in the past. So I would say that fishing brush piles on these obvious offshore flat areas probably is going to be pretty tough unless you're very confident that you can outfish other anglers. Now, one way that I would go about trying to fish in this area, if I was going to be out there, and this is just my personal approach, is that I would go out and I would graph all of this flat. I would spend a lot of time, probably a day and a half of practice, graphing this entire flat. And what I would try to do is I would try to find irregularities that are not obvious to other anglers. And a couple of the irregularities I'm looking for are, one, hard spots. So can I find shell beds or little rocky spots or a transition where there's a little bit harder bottom versus softer bottom, and something that's not going to pop off the depth finder. These areas are scattered out randomly on these flats. It's not like you're going to be able to just know where they are. They might just be randomly in a general zone. You're just going to have to make big sweeps across these flats until you find something. While I'm doing that, I would also be marking all the brush piles I find, obviously, so I can run and hit them if I see that there's a brush pile that hasn't been hit by a guy. I might run over to make a few casts on it. But in addition to trying to find isolated like shell or rock that's out in these flats, because again, that's still not that novel of an idea, the key that I would be looking for specifically is I would be looking at these small drains and ditches that run in to this flat. So here is a drain or a ditch that's feeding in here, and there's several other smaller drains and ditches as well. Within these drains, a lot of fish will actually set up on the bottom, belly on the bottom, in these drains in 20, 25 feet of water, maybe up the shallows 10, 15 feet of water, and they're not going to be positioned around any brush or any cover. All they're going to be focused on is feeding on bait fish that are swimming out here in these drains as well. If a guy can figure out how to track down the bait fish in a drain or a ditch like this and find those fish that are sitting either belly on the bottom or suspended chasing the bait fish in these drains away from the brush piles, I think they have a really good shot of doing well in this tournament. The brush pile deal, again, is super timing specific and it's very well known, but there are fish on these flats away from the brush piles as well, and there are a lot of these little drains and ditches. I mean, if you look at this, I'm just going to kind of zoom out to a high level. You have 1, 2, 3, maybe like 4 in here, 5, 6, 7. This is a whole big ditch, 8, 9, 10. There's like 10 or 12 ditches just in this zone, and there's a bunch more all throughout these flats that are more or less obvious depending on what mapping you're using, and maybe like a Lake Master mapping might have better mapping than this. Navionics, it's free on the web. But either way, I would be graphing the center of these drains and ditches, trying to find fish that are suspended up and around these areas. The great thing about fishing this type of pattern, one, is that those fish are going to move a little bit. So even if someone finds them in practice, there's a very good chance that they might move from one part of this ditch further up in towards the bank, or maybe further out if they get a big cold front, and you're going to be able to find a lot more fish that are moving up and down. And when you find fish that are moving, guys who practice and just basically pull up on the spot and will only fish on the waypoints that they mark, they're not going to catch those fish. So basically, you're going to be able to track them down the day of the tournament and figure out how to adapt to get them in the boat. And someone's saying, so basically Ben Milliken. And that is a great comment. I think Ben has a great shot of doing well in this tournament, given his skills with the live scope and with not just live scope, but down imaging and 2D sonar and side imaging. And I think that that's a big wild card in this event, honestly. Someone who can get on the live scope. As you can see, guys, live scope's been dominating all the recent professional tournaments, even on Seminole, on Toho, or not Toho, on Okeechobee, all those lakes over there. And basically, as you go through these tournaments, you see that live scope is playing more and more. Now, the interesting thing about both of those tournaments, and we'll get into it at the end of the stream, near the end, the guys who are catching them are not fishing for suspended bass out in the middle with the live scope. They're actually focused on bass that are positioned tight to the bottom of the lake, just like I'm talking about in this scenario. Those bass that Tyler Rivette was catching on Lake Okeechobee in the canals were belly on the bottom, sitting up on the bottom of the lake. Same thing with Joey Cifuentes on Lake Seminole. The fish were sitting up on the bottom in 20 to 22 feet of water around the standing timber, not suspended up in it. A lot of guys who use the live scope or use electronics, especially on this brush pile deal, are going to be looking for fish suspended over the tops of brush piles or around the brush piles, and they may even be looking for fish that are suspended in the middle of these drains. But if you aren't worried about catching suspended fish and you're focused on fish that are belly on the bottom, there's a really good chance that you can have some of those fish to yourself, especially if you can move and shift with them. So as you can see here, this whole zone, I mean, there's a massive amount of water in this area with lots of flats, lots of area to cover. So there's enough water if you really put your time in to find a couple of sweet spots. The trick is having them all to yourself. Now, the other area that was showing clear water on the deep dive app, the idea in here is that you're going to have similar water, just big flats and things like this, with one major creek cutting in. It's like 40 feet deep, which is kind of an interesting little deal. There's also another generally decent creek that cuts in front of this bridge, and there's a little bit of clear water, or more stained water, it's just not dirty, basically, in between these bridges. Same exact thing applies, guys. You're going to see guys graphing these flats out here, finding isolated brush piles, isolated shell beds, hard spots in these flats. It's going to be a lot of guys what they're going to be doing. Now, the other wild card in this event that I think personally could be a big player is some of these creeks that I marked up here that had clear water in them. This creek had clearer water than the rest of the surrounding creeks. We also had this creek over here and this creek over here. There are three creeks that had a little bit more stain to the water versus being very muddy. And back in these creeks, they're pretty deep. They're 25 feet deep. And I think that there is basically a good chance that someone could get into one of these creeks that are a little bit clearer and one, catch them live scoping, fishing a jerkbait or something like that in the middle of this creek channel here in 20-25 feet of water, maybe in these little like creek intersections where these little ditches cut into the main creek. I could see that being a big player, or just getting on some of these high spots and turns and catching fish again, dragging a Carolina rig, a jerkbait, stuff like that, further back up in these creeks. One of the things that doesn't get talked about on a lake like Eufaula is that there's a lot of current that pulls through the lake. And as you get into these little tiny creeks and areas like this, you're going to have a lot of current that pulls through these narrow creeks, creating shell beds. Shell beds are going to be a potential big player in this event. And guys who are catching on shell beds are probably not going to talk about it because nobody talks about shell beds. They'll say, oh, I'm fishing a ledge or I'm fishing a brush pile, but they're not going to say they're actually fishing a shell bed. And one of the places that I see is a couple obvious places that shell beds are going to set up in this creek are any places where these creek channels swing up against a flatter area, like right here. They swing up against this and make a turn, and you have a little bit of a high spot. So like right here is a great place for a shell bed. You might be able to have some shell that's even deposited right here on this creek turn. Obviously, off this type of point would be great. In this area, there's a lot of potential for shells. Same thing in this zone in here as well, where there's these flat areas and the creek channel swings in and hits close. The way you find those shells is basically graphing with side imaging or by getting in the same areas and just dragging a Carolina rig around and feeling for the shell. But I think that there could be a really good shell bed bite in some of these clear creeks, or fish just that are sitting out here in the middle that guys are targeting with drop shots and jerk baits with the live scope. There's a couple other creeks in here, again, that we mentioned that had some clear water that also still have some deep water. I mean, 30 foot of water back in some of these creeks. All these creeks have potential for guys catching them on shell beds, guys catching them with live scope, back in these little bays, little creeks that have slightly clearer water, as we showed on the Deep Dive app. So I'm just kind of checking the deep dive up again to make sure I'm not missing any of these big creeks. Looks like there's one of these creeks. This creek back in here has some clear water too, just looking at it. And it's kind of interesting if you look back in here. This creek definitely has some clear water, but it's very shallow. This could be a place where maybe if that water is more clear versus stained and we get a warm week, maybe there's a guy that can come back in here and catch him on a chatterbait, shallow grass, flipping wood, some shallower stuff back in some of these clear creeks here. This creek had some clear water to it as well. This could be a potential player. Both live scoping, honestly, offshore fishing or fishing shallow. So if I was out here practicing, guys, honestly, my game plan would be day one of practice, I'm going to be coming up to these shallow creeks way up the lake, because historically this is not where the tournaments are getting won, but there are some slightly clear water sections back up in here, and enough deep water for someone to go catch them on like a jerk bait or a Carolina rig on some of those shell beds. And I would check and graph through all these creeks. Basically, we have I'm just checking on the app, 1, 2, 3. These 4 creeks all have some slightly clear water in them. And I would be trying to find bait back in here, trying to find some suspended fish, or trying to find some shell beds. And this would be my number one pattern that I would try to start with, because I feel like I would have this more to myself than other anglers who are going to be fishing like crazy on this part of the lake. The next day of practice, if I was completely striking out in those creeks, I probably would spend it half of a day trying to target this midsection of the lake where you have these bridges which can protect you from the wind if you get really heavy winds, and that can help if you're fishing offshore. So I might check in between these bridges, and also this big flat out here would be a great place to check out. And then finally, if I had like a third or a fourth day of sorry, got stuff in my throat. If I had a third or a fourth day of practice, then I would probably spend it down here in kind of the community hole area, just getting with the boats, graph, try to see what I could find. And that would be my 3 or 4 days of practice, basically, for Lake Eufaula. And that's the data. That's how I broke it down. Hopefully that all made sense. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's see here. So yeah, I'm going to try to go through some comments now, and that is kind of the plan. So a couple questions here. Edward says, curious why you wouldn't find the bait fish, follow where they go, and then fish bass ambushing. That's exactly what I would do, Edward. That's my normal strategy game plan. When I'm talking about fishing these drains and ditches, that's exactly what I'm talking about down here. Basically, I would try to find here or anywhere on the lake, honestly, find the shad, wherever the shad are. I would be following those shad, hitting the brush piles that are in close proximity to the shad, following the bass that might be set up on the bottom of these drains, chasing the shad, all that stuff. And even tournament day, I wouldn't start fishing until I started seeing a big population of those shad. I would graph until I found them with 2D sonar, side imaging, down imaging, and I'm not just going to roll into an area and just start fishing. I'm going to spend some time graphing, making sure the bait fish are still there, and then I would go for it. Another potential player in there is also, if you go back in some of these creeks, especially up in these creeks up here, but anywhere on the lake, if you find a big crappie population, after seeing the last couple of Bassmaster Elite Series events, I would also be fishing around those crappie. That's how the last couple of tournaments have been won on the Elite Series. Joey Cifuentes specifically was fishing around spawning crappie in the tops of standing timber on Lake Seminole. And even if I didn't see shad, if I found some crappie that were spawning, or just crappie that were stacked up in the back of one of these creeks, I would probably try to target the base of the trees that are on or around the brush piles that those crappie are spawning around, or just setting up around, and that could be another good food source for those bass. So I would look for shad, but also crappie would be on my list of forage to check out. Jeff's asking if I would be fishing a chatterbait. Oh, no, Austin, you said the crappie. When would you target bass in your crappie instead of shad? Honestly, I would just try both. If I'm not getting bitter on the shad very well, I would also try her on the crappie, especially on lakes that have big bass where I know they're actually going to be able to eat the crappie. When you have 5 to 7 pound bass in your lake, they're a lot more likely to feed on those crappie than, for example, Beaver Lake where I fish, where you have a lot of 2 pound bass. The shad are going to be better on, or a better forage for those 2 to 3 pound bass. And if I wanted to go catch a quality fish, maybe I should be fishing more around the crappie that those bigger largemouth can feed around on a lake like Beaver. There's just not that many 5-pounders in Beaver relative to 3-pounders. But on a lake like Eufaula, where there's a lot of 4 to 5-pounders, that crappie might be a good forage to also fish around as well. Sorry, Jeff, back to your question on the chatterbait. I wouldn't be throwing a chatterbait personally. I'm not a shallow water guy, and based on the data I showed, 73% of the tournaments or top finishes come offshore. So I would be sticking to my strength and fishing offshore, but there probably are going to be a few guys back in some of these creeks that I was showing earlier with that stained water that get on a chatterbait bite, that get on a shallow water bite that definitely could work. Let's see here. Let's see. Johnny, this is from Todd. Recently got destroyed at a BFL on Table Rock this weekend throwing a shaky head with a swimming Cinco on bluffs. What should I be doing differently? Great question. So I can tell you how guys are catching them on Table Rock right now because that's how I'm catching them on Beaver as well. I'm going to duplicate this for you and show you the... I'm just going to go away from here. Just to answer your question, Todd, the way the guys are catching them right now, and love it or not, live scope is the deal. Randy has a video where he was out there and he got on a decent shallow water bite, but honestly anymore on Table Rock, if you're going to do well, where I would be fishing is I would be trying to fish the back third of major creeks, graph around with your 2D sonar until you see big balls of shad. I would also, on my fish finder, I would be looking for 3 to 5 pound largemouth around those shad with arches on 2D sonar, and basically just graph the literal dead center of these creeks over 80 feet of water. And like, for example, I was on Table Rock, I think a month and a half, 2 months ago, and it wasn't quite happening super well yet, but I sat right here, right where this intersection is in the back of this creek, Indian Resort area, Baxter area. Like right in here, I loaded up on like 14 pounds of spotted bass right in this intersection, creek intersection, and they were just suspended chasing bait fish out here. I know that I've caught them in the past really well, even as far back as this far back in the creek, and catching good largemouth way back in these creeks, just suspended around the bait. Guys are fishing ice fishing jigs, Demiki rigs, over 40 to 80 feet of water around the bait fish. That's one of the really good ways to catch them. If you didn't want to do that, the other option is to go up the lake, run up to the James River, and fish brush piles. And you can graph brush piles up the James, all up and down in the mouths of the creeks on the main lake. And there are fish that set up, big largemouth that set up in those brush piles. But you need to throw Alabama rigs around them or throw jerk baits around brush piles on any of these, secondary points that are setting up here or here. Any sort of like pockets, brush piles that set up here, even some of these main lake flats out here. And if you find enough brush piles, you fish enough of them, you might run into 5 good ones. But the most consistent way to do it, and the way the guys are catching most of the quality fish on Table Rock, are in these creeks, fishing in the dead center of them in 40 to 80 feet of water, and the bass are suspended in 20 to 60 feet. So hopefully that makes sense. If you don't have live scope, it's going to be tough to catch them out there, honestly, right now, to be 100% honest. Let's see here. Curious on deep dive lakes where all this data is not available. What determines your recommendations for pattern structure bait? So, Carrie, we're using the same data basically. We've just been we just visualize it differently. So we have data for all of these lakes. The way that we do it, if it's not specifically for Lake Eufaula, is we take all of the lake's characteristics and we basically try to match up the best patterns based on lake characteristics from lakes where we do have data. So, for example, if a lake has certain water visibility or depth, or like it has a dam, just factors like that, we say, okay, this lake is a pretty good match. Let's say small lake X in the middle of nowhere. One of the lakes, for example, would be like over here, Lake Uchi. There's not professional tournaments on Lake Uchi, but Lake Uchi has a very similar setup in a lot of ways to like a Grand Lake in Oklahoma, minus the docks. So we take some of the information from tournaments on lakes like Grand Lake and other lakes like that, and we try to match the patterns the best we can to the lake. So that's how we do it. It's not 100% perfect, but it's the best, the closest proxy you're going to get without figuring out what every local derby is, how guys are catching every local derby on every lake, and they wouldn't tell you that information anyways. Let's see here. Keep rolling through these questions. People are saying, keep it coming, great content. Okay, glad you guys are enjoying. People are logging in too, so people seem to be enjoying. Let's see. Okay, people are loving it. Okay, more people tuned in, so maybe people are enjoying this a little bit after all. Water clarity on my lakes I fish is always changing. How can the app possibly know water clarity at any given time? That's from Turf Ferguson. It doesn't know it every single time. We update it on average like 2 to 3 times a week on the water clarity map. So it's not knowing all the time, but it's not knowing like minute to minute water clarity, but it knows, or it gives you a good enough perspective where you're going to be able to see the water clarity changing, throughout a given week or a given month. And it's not going to be spot on perfect every single time, because if it rained that same day and the water's flowing in and the water's muddying up minute to minute, you're not going to see that. But overall, you're going to be able to see the trends and what the water clarity is doing, which is better than nothing, because literally there's no other way to get it right now. So there's no other way to see water clarity across the lake. So it might be off, by a little bit here or there, but it's going to be, in general, what you need to do to kind of get a good sense of what's going on. So that's how it works. Let's see here. I think some people are doubting if the data is true or not. It comes from tournaments and observed data and live streams and things like that. So, it's publicly available information. You guys can go collect the data yourself, watch all the tournaments and grab the data if you want as well. It's all there. That's all I'll say about the data. Trying to roll through all of this. Let's see here. Sorry, guys, just trying to roll through here. Just learning offshore fish. Thank you for your channel. Thanks you and your channel. Can't wait to throw that offshore fish the moment jig that I got from Jewel Baits. Appreciate that. Thanks for the support. What would you do in a major river for, say, an Alabama river? So from a river system, that's a whole other topic. There's all kinds of strategies. It just depends on water temperature, current flow rates. So there's some river systems coming up in some of these upcoming tournaments, so I'll break down a river here in the future here. What map settings are you using to have the creek channels show up so well? If you're talking about here on the on Navionics web app, for example, like this, all I'm doing, this is the free Navionics web app. You can go over here, and this is the Navionics. You can switch to sonar charts, which sometimes improves the quality. I didn't even have those on. But this is just stock Navionics web app. I link it down in the description of the video. But yeah, this is free Navionics web app online. Let's see here. Are you hiring for core tackle? I tie all my own jigs and hair jigs and have some other ideas. John, send us an email at, I think it's info@coretackle.com. Definitely interested in that. I love throwing a hair jig. We don't want to start making a hair jig when we know we can't produce. We get a lot of people wanting to buy them, so it's hard to produce enough of those. So yeah, shoot us an email. You can go to coretackle.com and our email's over there. I don't know the exact email. But yeah, it's over there. And then, let's see here. Stefan, tips for lakes without shad. Yeah, so lakes without shad is the main key with lakes without shad is you're going to be going to lakes, for example, up north. It's usually what we're going to be dealing with. And if you have no shad in your lake, like a Lake Mendota, the bass are going to be feeding then on bluegill, on perch. There's gobies. Sometimes you have alewife and golden shiner, so it's not like threadfin shad, but there is bait fish that swim. And basically, the lake's set up completely different. They fish completely different. The seasonal movement of the bass is completely different. So it's very hard to correlate what's happening on like a Lake Eufaula in Alabama to a Lake Mendota in Wisconsin. I do have live streams in the past that I've broken down northern bodies of water, and I grew up actually fishing Lake Mendota and fishing lakes like this in Wisconsin. I spent the first 12 years of my life in Wisconsin, so I learned to fish on these lakes, so I'm very familiar with how they work. I'm not going to go into all in the stream, but we also have seminars on fishthemoment.com. If you gotta go to the virtual seminars page, and there are seminars over here. Do we have our natural lake seminar, the bass behavior on northern natural lakes? If you want information on how to fish lakes without shad, this is the best resource I can give you. Basically, we break down the differences between what it's like fishing on a northern lake versus a southern lake, how to correlate information between what you hear me talking about in like Beaver Lake in Arkansas to lakes in Wisconsin, in New York, all those natural lakes. No shad, lots of grass, just big bowls. So definitely check out this seminar, Natural Lake Seminar, fishthemoment.com. I also have live streams if you don't. If you don't want to buy anything, that's fine as well. I'm not pushing that or anything. I do have a couple live streams in the backlog. You can type Fish the Moment live stream like natural lakes, and you should be able to find it. Let's see here. And let's see. Will the deep bite be around for a couple of weeks on lakes like Table Rock? Yeah, though the deep bite should be around until probably water temperatures hit like 52 degrees. Right now they're still like in the 40s. So yeah, you should definitely have that. You should definitely have the deep bite for a while. Honestly, the deep bite should be good until water temperatures hit like 55 degrees usually. Question about the Elk River, is it still dirty? From the Bassman Anderson. That's in the deep dive app. I'll actually pull it up just to show you. Why not? I'll pull this up. Let's see here. I'll show you how this works. So we pull this up. So, let's see. Grand Lake of the Cherokees. We're going to pull in here. Actually, this is something new. You guys probably going to see here rolled out very soon. This is a new way we're visualizing our patterns. I wasn't expecting to show this, but since you guys are here like 45 minutes into a stream, why not? This is our new tournament patterns view we're going to be rolling out, where we're actually breaking up the lake into sections on, like, for example, a Grand Lake. You're going to be able to go in here, and this is kind of how you can view some of the tournament data that we've had. You can see what the strategies are, all kinds of stuff. So this is pretty interesting stuff that we're rolling out, and it breaks the lake down to sections and gives you all the tournament data that we showed at the beginning of this video, but visualized on the map. But clarity-wise, we can go in here. You can actually switch to this view, which is the clearest and the dirtiest. So the clearest water is down here by the dam, by the Disney boat ramp. And then up here, up the river, it's very dirty. But overall, it looks like the elk is clearing up near the back, actually, if you look at this. So the elk is starting to get some clear water. It's stained now, but I know it was super muddy. It was like super blown out. But at the mouth of it, it's still really muddy. But if you head further back in the back, you have, more stain. I mean, it's not clear by any means, but it's more stained than it was. Or it's clearer than it was. So it's getting there. This is back where Egwin Evers won the Bassmaster Classic 2016. But yeah, if you get the Deep Dive app, you're going to be able to keep up to date on what's going on these lakes. And we're going to launch this is such a cool feature where you can like scroll through the lake with the water clarity bands. It's not in the Deep Dive app right now. This isn't. You just get the full water clarity map just right now. But we're going to be rolling this out here in the next week or two. We're going to be able to do this cool scrolling and seeing the different bands of water visibility. So there you go. Johnny, it doesn't help when YouTube doesn't send notifications. Last time I got notified after it ended. Today notifications came through 10 minutes into the stream. It's a problem. Yeah, I don't know how to fix that. One thing I can say, Steve, is if you follow Fish the Moment on Instagram or on Facebook at Fish the Moment, we did post a reminder this morning about the live stream, and I do plan to be doing them every Monday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I also put out a community post I don't know how YouTube works with notifications. They're very bad at that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, I don't have any control over that. But we do post on our social media page when we have live streams coming up. So yeah, definitely check that out. Is there water clarity? Is the water clarity why they were so bunched up on the Okeechobee tournament? Yeah, that was the main reason. The water clarity on Okeechobee is very weird because the wind will push the clear water into different zones, and it gets real wonky. We're trying to figure out how to get water clarity on like lakes like Okeechobee, but that's kind of a beast. So we're trying to figure that part out, but that's something we're working towards, but we don't have anything for the Florida lakes quite yet because that's a whole other complication. There's a lot of complexity. We spent a long time getting this water clarity right. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and a lot of validation and all kinds of stuff to make sure we're giving you the correct data. So we can't just roll it out to any lake anywhere anytime. There's certain lakes with certain features and certain processes we have to follow to make it happen. So yeah, we're going to be getting water clarity out to as many lakes as we can, but we want to make sure it's accurate. It's the best of our ability as well, so we're not giving you guys bad data, because that would be worse than anything. Send you up the Elk River and say it's stained when it's actually chocolate milk. That would not be good. Let's see here. I just scrolled all the way down. See. Rain 2 days before tournament, 50 degrees in the pre-spawn. You still working drains on the flats or looking shallower? Honestly, I would still be looking at those drains in the flats, even if water temperatures are in the 50s. I would just expect those bait fish and the fish to move shallower. So if I'm going to put this on, hide this again. So if I was going back to like a, let's see here. There we go. If I came back over here, I would expect on a lake like Eufaula, let's just pick one of these random drains, like right here. Let me find one that's like really obvious, because there's sometimes these drains are not. Let's just pull this drain. This is like, sorry, no, that's bad. That's too obvious. Let me find one that's in between. All of these are like super obvious or like nothing. Okay, let's just pull up this drain here. This is a good one. So this is actually a bad one. Dang it. Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna find one. I'm gonna find one that looks. Here we go. Okay, this is like very clear and easy to see, but not that bad. So let's say that the 50-degree water temperatures, the fish were setting up in this zone in the drain. They were setting up in like 17 foot of water, middle of the drain here, and you started to get water that pushed in to this creek. Usually what's going to happen is those bait fish are going to push further back into this drain, and there's two things that could happen. Those fish could push straight to these secondary points and get up in shallow grass, be feeding around rock, whatever is up there, and that's definitely a possibility. But they also could just move a little bit and just get in the mouth of this pocket and still be in the center of that drain. The way you're going to know that is you're going to graph with your side imaging and 2D sonar and down imaging, and if the bait fish are up here against the bank and you see them on side scan against the bank, go fish the bank. If the bait fish are out here in the middle of the creek, then look for bass suspended on them in the middle of the creek. Now, most likely, just from one rain, those bass are not going to go from being out here off the bank suspended to just setting up right up against the bank. Now, over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, if the shad are setting up right here in the middle of this drain, eventually those bass are going to start moving to those banks. So it's kind of hit or miss depending on like the exact situation. But if there's fish in this drain here and they're setting up, they're going to be moving into this general zone, like this area right here. Those bass are not going to swim from here and then go across the lake and spawn in this creek. They're waiting to spawn right here. So usually you can relocate them. You just have to figure out the presentation, the bait, the approach that actually gets them in the boat. Let's see here. Let's see. Like breakdown of Lake Russell in South Carolina. I don't know if there are any tournaments there. I would love to break down. I would love to break down every lake. Unfortunately, I try to break down these tournament lakes because that's where all the tournaments are, and hopefully you guys can take information and apply that. Let's see. Seeing some Randy comments as usual. Do Do you ever go fishing at night? And if so, what do you like for lights? I don't personally fish at night just because I can't film. It's hard to film and stuff like that. I've gone a couple times in the past, like in the summer and stuff. It's very fun, but I don't have any great tips for night fishing. I don't do it enough. James, love your channel. I've learned so much from you and your presentations. Best teacher in bass fishing I've ever seen. Appreciate that, James. Thanks for the kind words. Really appreciate that. How long before Deep Dive has this water clarity on all lakes? Well, given that there's like 3,000 lakes currently that we have strategies for, I don't think anytime in like the near future, but we're going to be rolling out as many lakes as we can every single week. I can't give an exact estimate, but we're going to have hundreds of lakes out. At least by the end of this year, we'll have hundreds of lakes out. So we're going to start with all the major lakes. We're basically doing it off of like how many users we have per lake. So hopefully after the next coming months, there's going to be lakes popping up in your area based on users. We have users all over the country. So lakes will be popping up, and hopefully you'll be able to start seeing them. And I'll make sure to update you guys on the stream and also in videos when we do have new lakes that have been posted with water clarity. I'll make sure to share that list with you so you know. Let's see here. Saw 61 degree temp a few days ago here in North Carolina. Shallow, dirty water. Yeah, that's crazy. Some of the fish this time of year can actually start spawning. I mean, there are fish spawning over there in on Lake Seminole in Georgia. So right now is already time when those fish can start spawning. I don't know what the water temperatures are on Lake Eufaula. I would expect that they are probably going to be somewhat warm, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't really know the water temp situation there. So if the water temp's warm, there might be some fish there pushing up and getting shallow and getting in that mode, and more dirty water areas back in the back of the creeks could definitely play. I still think based on all the tournaments and stuff, we're probably still going to see it be a pre-spawn event, or there's going to be pre-spawn bass to be caught, and those are the most efficient ways to fish out there. But there definitely could be a wild card of someone pulling back in some of these creeks and fishing shallow. Let's see here. Let's see here. Dad bod angler. So runoff is good and blown out is bad. The difference simply the amount of dirt or soil in the runoff. Yeah, that's basically it. I'll show you an example here on Deep Dive just to give you a perspective on that. See if I can get this to go. There we go. Okay. Oh, bam. I already was on the right screen. Okay, so blown out, for example, on a Grand Lake, this would be what I would consider blown out is like the back of this creek back in here. If you look at the water visibility on our picker, you can see that it's dirty and it's really muddy, and it's like muddying up that creek. So you have a lot of muddy water back in there. It's not stained, it's very muddy. That would be considered what I would say blown out, that real dirty water. Now, a creek that might be just runoff would be, for example, the back of this creek here, Drowning Creek, where you have clearer water near the front, kind of. Like it's somewhat stained, and then in the back you have a little bit dirtier water. But that little bit dirtier water, that small change in visibility, just brings a little bit of the silt, some plankton, some of the insects and stuff into the water. That will get the bait fish active. And then also if you have a situation, for example, up this creek up here with elk, where you have really dirty water in the majority of the creek and clearer water is actually coming in, that's when that runoff is helpful. So usually you want it to be either just staining up the water a little bit, like changing the water clarity just a little bit dirtier, but not completely making it chocolate milk, or you want it to be a situation where the water's actually getting clearer in a dirty creek. That's kind of the two scenarios you're looking for overall. Let's see here. Steve says, is this Monday night live stream going to replace the Tuesday night ones you were doing with Randy? Yeah, we're going to basically, I'm probably just going to be streaming solo going forward on Mondays because my schedule is kind of crazy. I might not be able to come out every single Monday just with everything I'm doing with the app and everything going on, but I'm going to try to make it most Mondays. I'm not going to be streaming. I'll also let you guys know during this live stream, like I'm going to be on next week. So next Monday, we're still doing the live stream, no problem. Monday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. If I'm not going to be streaming, I'll let you know the week before, and also let you know on social media. Let's see here. West Point Lake in Georgia, temperatures jumped 10 degrees in the last 2 weeks to 62 degrees. Will the bass instantly move to beds for the spawn? They have been in the first half of the creek recently. A lot of times, so there's a couple factors that influence whether bass are going to spawn. A lot of it has to do with moon phase. So if you get a full moon, obviously those bass are more likely to move up to spawn. Also, if the water levels are stable, that's going to encourage the bass to spawn. And if those water temperatures are consistently stable in that 60-degree range for 4, 5, 6 days in a row. So you kind of need all those factors to line up. You need stable water levels, you need a good moon phase, and you need the water temperatures in that 60-degree range. If all those factors line up, those bass are probably going to start spawning. But again, not every bass spawns at the same time. There's still a chance that there's going to be fish that are pre-spawn, and they're going to wait, especially fish more out in the main lake and stuff like that. They won't spawn right away. So you're going to have waves of fish that spawn. There's probably already fish, if it's 60 degrees, there's probably already fish that have spawned and are post-spawn on your lake already, even just because in the past, week, that water temperature rose. So there's probably fish that have already just came up and spawned if the water was stable, and they're already post-spawn. There's going to be pre-spawn bass, and there's probably spawning fish that are still to come. So the spawn's a really weird time of the year because things kind of go crazy, and it all depends on a lot of factors. So I can't predict it perfectly, but that's kind of the 3 factors to look out for. Steve says, how do you feel about Randy having a completely different and destructive view than yours? So I work with Randy for Fish at the Moment, do all that sort of stuff. Randy has his own channel. He has his own opinions, and I think it's great that people have different opinions, and I get along great with Randy. He has his own thoughts on fishing and things like that. It's not like we get in arguments or get mad at each other. I think it's fine that one person has one view and another person has another view. My view is I use electronics. I enjoy electronics, and that's how I'm going to fish. And I've always used electronics. It's not like this is new. Like now that LiveScope came out, I'm a LiveScoper. Like I've made my video. All my channel has been about electronics for years. Randy's known that. He chose to work with me even though that he knew my channel was 100% about offshore fishing and electronics. And that hasn't changed since LiveScope came out or anything like that. So we're fine. It's not a big deal. And I mean, if Randy has his opinions, he has his opinions. But I mean, you guys are still here watching my stream. So if people want to watch Randy's content, awesome. And if they don't want to watch my content, that's perfectly fine. You guys are able to watch whatever you want. It's the great thing about, the ability to just watch things online and watch it for free. You can choose to watch what you want. So, if you guys like my content, awesome. If you like Randy's content, awesome. There's content for both groups of people. People who hate LiveScope, don't want anything to do with it, anything like that, that's fine. And there's my channel, which I use as much technology and data and stuff like that as possible to help us become better fishermen, and I think there's room for both. So I don't like to take extreme one way or another. It's just the way it is. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Ushfalla should be in the high 50s or maybe the low 60s. Oh, wow. So it's definitely going to be warmer than I was expecting. There's probably still going to be fish that are pre-spawn because the last time they fished their water temperatures, I remember, were in the 60s for like red crest, I think, the last time they were there. But Dustin Connell still caught him on a jerkbait. And even past that, there was another tournament where our temperatures were still in the 60s, and John Sukup won a NPFL event still fishing for pre-spawn bass, even though there were still shallow bass everywhere. So I still think it's probably going to get one offshore, but someone could surprise you up shallow and catch him for sure. And then Turd Ferguson, glad to see Fish Moments making a comeback. Seems like a lot of time focused on Bass Fishing Declassified and Deep Dive app. Hopefully Fish the Moment will get more attention going forward. Great channel. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's the goal. We're trying to make more content for Fish the Moment as much as I can. Do these live streams. The Deep Dive app, as you guys can imagine, is taking a lot of time with all of these features and stuff that we're putting out, all this cool stuff. So spending a lot of time on Deep Dive, and got Declassified up and running. So now I'm back on Fish the Moment, and I'm going to make as much content as possible. So hopefully you guys enjoy. How do you decide to fish the very backs of creeks during the spawn versus the coves in the first third, second third? So basically what I find is that the back third of creeks are going to warm up the fastest because usually they'll have dirtier water back there. And those creeks are where the bass spawn first. So usually what I'll find is that early in the spawn, like when bass just start to spawn, I'll start fishing the backs of the creeks with the dirtier water, or maybe not dirty water, but like stained up water, and I'll try to fish for spawning fish there. Honestly, I don't fish for spawning fish, but if I was going to, that's what I would do, is find the creeks normally on the upper end of the lake with more stains of the water in the very backs, like this creek right here. These are the places where the bass are going to spawn first. Then after that, you're going to find that the bass are going to spawn in the dirtier water creeks. They're kind of in the mid-lake section where there's slightly stained water in the backs, but not like as stained. So like these creeks here, they're probably going to spawn there second. They also then could start spawning more towards the mouths of some of these creeks. And then the last wave of fish that spawn are going to be fish that spawn in the clearest water on these main lake pockets, like these little like small main lake pockets here. And those are the last fish to spawn. So usually what I do is when the fish are spawning like crazy back in these pockets, back up where this dirtier water is, I'm going to be fishing down by the dam. And I'm going to be trying to fish for pre-spawn fish down by the dam. And then when the fish are spawning down by the dam, I'm going to run way up these creek arms and these rivers to try to fish post-spawn fish that are off the beds and are grouping up on shallow flats, shell beds, brush piles, stuff like that. And I'm going to go after the post-spawn fish while everyone is down by the dam fishing for the spawning fish. So I don't like to chase the spawners. I like to chase the pre-spawners or the post-spawners. That's kind of my deal. Let's see here. Randy sure doesn't like live, so I wonder that don't have live scope, but I want it. Live scope is awesome. It's great. It's also coming down in price a little bit, which is nice a little bit. So it's really fun. I don't use live scope all the time. I'm actually getting a setup, guys, just so you know, where I'm going to try to get 360 imaging and show you guys how to fish offshore. I like having something showing on the screen to show you what's going on, but I'm gonna get 360. I have a 360 on my boat, but I can't share the screen in my videos like I do with live scope. But I'm working on that, and I'll show you guys how to catch fish with 360 with just waypoints, all that stuff. Right now, most of the fish I'm catching are suspended, so live scope is necessary. My goal is to only use live scope in my videos when it's absolutely necessary for me to catch fish, because like right now on beaver, the quality fish are suspended out there in the middle. When the quality fish are setting up on the bottom or on brush piles or rock piles, I'm not going to be using the live scope. I'll show you how to use waypoints or use 360 imaging like I've been doing for 10 or 7 years, or how long this channel has been around. Just in the winter time, in the pre-spawn winter especially, live scope is super powerful and it helps catch a lot more fish, and it's just the best way to catch them. But if it's not necessary, I'm not going to force you guys to watch me use live scope. I'm basically going to err on the side of using live scope as little as possible and focus on techniques that are still highly effective even without live scope. But right now live scope is pretty necessary where I'm at to be consistent on especially lakes like beaver and stuff. So that's why I'm using it right now. Let's see here. Is the reason Randy is no longer here is because he got smoked in all those challenges? Maybe. That might be. I'm just kidding. Probably not. Maybe. What do you think about the daylight hours if the water temperature comes up fast from the spawn? Do you think they'll wait till the days get longer to spawn? I've heard a lot of stuff like that. I think that has an impact. Honestly, I just graph around, and if I try to find the pre-spawners, and hopefully they're still there. I'm not like a super expert around the spawn. I honestly didn't fish that much during the spawn time of the year because I was always in school. Most of my fishing got done during the winter and the summer, so I'm a lot better winter fisherman and summer fisherman than during the spawn because I was always in school. And recently, with all the stuff Fish at the Moment, I'm always going to the Bassmaster Classic and events and all this stuff in the spring. So I don't even really fish around the spawn all that much. I usually don't even go fishing when it's spawn time. I just let the fish get to the post spawn and just kind of skip the spawn. That's just me though. I don't like sight fishing or fishing for spawning fish. So anyways. And John says, I watch both channels. Great content on both. Appreciate that. And then 72 here in Hot Springs. Haven't checked Hamilton yet. Wow, that's crazy. And then wondering if those bucks hit the bank and are relatively easy to catch, but the females are like ghosts at that time, even out deeper. Like they don't have to even eat crazy until they move. Yeah, that's a deal, Michael. Definitely the females right before they get to spawn, they fed up. They're just getting a weird funk, and that's a situation, guys, where like on the Grand Lake, it's a big lake. And there's days on Grand where I will run like from the dam all the way up to like the Elk River in a fishing day, trying to find fish that are active in the spring. And that's why I don't like fishing around the spawn all that much, because you can get in a 5-mile zone of the lake, like this highlighted zone, and those females are just acting weird, and it's just really hard to catch big ones in that zone. But you could come up to this zone up here, and it's going crazy, and it's super easy to catch them, and it's such a section of lake specific deal when those bass are in a mood. So I don't like fishing around the spawn because it's just kind of a pain. Will Fish the Moment be in Knoxville? I will not be in Knoxville, unfortunately. I already planned something like a year and a half out, and I was not thinking about it, and I booked this my plans I booked right on top of the Classic, which was bad planning on my part, but yeah, it is what it is. Do you have a Lowrance at the console and bow at the moment? I do. So I have a Lowrance HDS Live, which is my main graphing unit. I would like to be using my Humminbird Helix as well, but I can't share the screen, so I don't have a Humminbird Helix right now. I'm not using it. If I could share the screen, I would be. So I have an HDS Live as my main graphing unit, a 9-inch unit, and I have a Elite FS up front where I can link the waypoints, so I can see my waypoints up front, and I literally don't have anything connected into that unit except for, it's just GPS mapping, that's all it's for. And then I have my live scope unit. I'm hoping to upgrade here soon to get a Garmin unit in the back, and also to get these Humminbird units that I can screen share, so I can use Humminbird and also use 360, so that's kind of the deal. But yeah, that's my setup. I'll make a whole video on my new setup once I get it installed and all that stuff, but that's still in the works. And then we got a comment here from Huggies Hobby Shop. Sorry, butchered that 3 different ways. Randy teaches me stuff, Gianni teaching me stuff, all for free, and I love it. Appreciate that. And then David says, don't forget BLAT. Yeah, there's a lot of great YouTubers out there. I've been out of the game for a bit. I feel like I'm coming just back into the scene because I've been not making a lot of videos. So a lot of great content out there. I'm just glad you guys choose to spend your time with me. 193 of you guys watching this live stream. And I'm just literally sitting here answering questions and just not even talking about anything really that interesting, it feels like. So appreciate that. Glad you guys enjoy my streams, enjoy the content. One more recap too. One thing is I just wanted to say about the Bassmaster tournaments. One more thing while I have you guys. I think it's been super interesting that both of the recent Bassmaster tournaments, I'm going to switch this here real quick. Both of the recent Bassmaster tournaments have been won with live scope, but there haven't been that many guys doing it. I was shocked that Joey Cifuentes was the only guy live scoping in those trees. One, I was surprised that John Sukup, Bass Tank, from the Bass Tank was not here because he's so good at fishing this way. I'm shocked he wasn't doing it. Also was shocked he wasn't kept fishing in the river. And there's a lot of guys who are pretty good with the live scope. Patrick Walters, a lot of these guys, Cody Huff. The one thing I think that Cifuentes figured out that the other guys weren't figuring out is that they were seeing the crappie and they were missing the bass that were set up tight to the bottom. On these trees that he was fishing, he mentioned that those bass were on the bottom around these trees. They weren't suspended up. So if you just graph for them, it might have been a little bit hard to spot them. And even if you live scoped around, you might see the crappie but miss the bass. And I think the same thing happened for Tyler Rivette when he was fishing on the canals. And actually in one of Bradley Hallman and John Sukup's practice videos, Hallman mentioned, he was like, man, you would be a hero in that canal, John, if you went and crappie fished. And he's like, yeah, the crappie are crazy in there. So he knew the crappie were in there. He just never took the time to go in there, or maybe he did, I don't know. But he missed the bass that were in there, and Tyler figured it out. And the same thing with Cifuentes here. Figured out that those bass were around those crappie. So I think going forward, more guys are going to start realizing that live scope is going to be a player day in, day out. You just have to really look for those fish and maybe just not look for suspended fish and the obvious fish anymore. You have to look for those fish that are tired to the bottom. They're kind of sitting around in weird areas, stuff like that. So great deal for these guys, though. Figured out something unique and something special. And it's honestly a new wave or a new style of fishing that's coming out. fishing for those fish that are tight to the bottom, sitting out here in these deeper water areas and figuring it out. So you'll probably see more of it, whether you like that or not. That's kind of what it is, but I definitely thought that was interesting, just at a high level from these tournaments. And Dave said, I'm more interested in getting a 360 than a live scope. 360 is really nice too as well, especially if you're really focused on fishing targets, like brush piles and stuff. It definitely is helpful. Steve Harden says, appreciate the depth that you bring to all the topics you cover. Class act. Appreciate that, Steve. Really do. Have you noted any differences in fishing tidal systems? General thoughts on how fish set up or change behavior as tides change? I've never fished a tidal fishery before, so I am fully unqualified to talk about that topic, unfortunately. Never fished one before. And then Jeff Cropper says, Johnny, thanks for all the tips and your advice. Hopefully one day I'll be helping other people as much as you help me. Thank you. Appreciate that, Jeff. And then Dad Bod says, Sukup mentioned he was fishing there in practice, but was using a jerkbait and didn't slow down enough to see the bottom huggers. Yeah, it makes sense. I can see that happening for sure. That's pretty interesting. And Arkansas win, Whoop Pig Suey. Kind of take it when we can. That's very true. Yeah, it's been a while for the Arkansas guys, so that's good. Larry Nixon's, he's from, I think Cifuentes is from near B Branch, right? He's disciple of Larry Nixon, so good deal there. Taking the Larry Nixon style and moving it forward. Larry Nixon, master of the worm, plastic worm. Cifuentes winning it on the worm, fishing on the bottom with the live scope. So it's like a new age Larry Nixon over there. Good deal. That was awesome. Awesome. So that was it, guys. That's all I got for you on the stream. Definitely check out the Deep Dive app. I was showing it a lot during the stream if you guys are interested. Not everything I'm showing in the app right now is actually available. As I mentioned, I'm showing you guys kind of the behind the scenes look on some of this stuff, but we'll be rolling out this like water clarity slider and more water clarity maps to lakes in the very near future. So definitely check it out on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Also, if you guys want to check out any of my products to help support Fish the Moment or just supports what I'm doing here, you can check out all of that on fishthemoment.com. I'll pull this over here. You guys can see it over on fishthemoment.com. And if you guys like the content I do here, this is literally just impromptu, just me getting on here talking, you can definitely check out my virtual seminars where I do a lot more in-depth instruction by myself and with Randy Blockett. We kind of break up the shallow and the offshore content, which works out really well. Some of the stuff is just me talking offshore fishing, though. And these are a lot more prepared presentations where I'll spend 3 hours really breaking down a topic with a ton of graphics, with a ton of data, stuff like that. And I give frameworks and slides and all kinds of stuff that you guys can take with you. So these are very helpful seminars if you guys are interested. You can also check out my sonar settings guides if you guys want to get some settings for your units. These are a great way to support the channel as well. And it's just the settings I use on my fish finders. All these units I've used for a considerable amount of time. I didn't just like go out one day and film these settings. I made sure I put a lot of time in behind these units to make sure these settings are right. So just so you know, that's what the settings guides are. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then thank you, Edward, for the $50 super chat. Really appreciate that, Edward. Thanks so much. Appreciate the support there. And all the support you guys give. Fish the Moment, for Deep Dive app, all that stuff. Hugely appreciated. Thank you guys so much for all of that. Let's see here. Anything else? Any plans to come up and fish the St. Lawrence? I don't have any plans right now, but definitely something that sounds interesting in the future. And then will you talk about Lake Norman when Red Crest comes around? Yes, I will. And actually, is Norman... Let me see here. I need to check that, actually. Yes. Look at this. If you go to the Deep Dive app right now that I'm saying this, the Deep Dive app has... I think it should be live. I'm not 100% sure on this. You may have to check this. But if you have the Deep Dive app, Lake Norman is live in the Deep Dive app, if I am not mistaken. It should be in there right now. So water clarity for Lake Norman is available. It should be available in the Deep Dive app, if I'm not mistaken. Or if not, it's coming very, very, very soon. If it's not in there right now, it will be in the very near future. Because I have the map right here, which is pretty sweet. So you can see, got this whole feature where I do this like cutting of the lake. That'll be in very soon. not in the app right now, but it's coming. So anyways, good deal. That's it, guys. Appreciate everybody joining the stream, and thanks again always. If you're listening to the podcast, you're listening to the live stream played back on YouTube, appreciate you watching all the way through. Really appreciate the support, and we'll see you guys next Monday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, same place, Fish the Moment YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next stream or in the next video. Talk to you guys soon.